Welcome to the Deep Dive. Tonight we are peeling back the layers of a life defined by one massive, glorious contradiction. The life of Wassily Kandinsky.
It really is quite something. It's not just a career change story. It's more like an identity implosion followed by a complete reconstruction. You have to picture it. Late 19th century Moscow.
Right, a city built on pretty rigid social structures, intellectual stability.
Exactly. And here you have this brilliant, promising young lawyer. He's dedicated to property law, economics, perfectly stable, guaranteed future. He's absolutely set to become an academic authority.
Yeah, the absolute picture of conventional success, logical progression, everything lined up. But then, at, the relatively late age of 30, this man, Wassily Kandinsky, makes probably the most irrational, maybe beautiful leap possible.
He just throws it all away.
Totally. He abandons logic, stability, his entire sensible career path, moves to Munich to become a painter.
And not just any painter, that's the key. He becomes this prophet of the invisible, a pioneer who genuinely believed that color possessed a voice. That sound could actually be seen.
It's like a metaphysical crisis played out on canvas.
It really is. And we've got sources detailing his meticulous journey, from that dutiful Moscow law student right through to being this key pioneer of 20th century geometric abstraction. We're talking about a man who ended up giving spiritual rules to lines and circles. It's fascinating.
So our mission for you tonight is pretty simple. We need to unpack the surprising facts, the sort of mystical theories, and the major, often quite painful life shifts that made him, essentially the mapmaker of modern art and design.
He literally went from legal contracts to cosmic blueprints.
Exactly.
And for you, the listener, this is really a deep dive into how genuine, undeniable passion can force a total breakdown of the most solid logic.
Right.
And how one man's attempt to simply paint his inner world, what he called the inner necessity, ended up defining our entire visual culture. From gallery walls to architecture, and even maybe the minimalist interface on the screen you might be looking at right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. So Kandinsky's early life, born in 1866, it gives you absolutely no hints, really, of the revolutionary he was destined to become.
Not at all. He was the quintessential model Russian student. Smart, articulate, polite, attending Moscow University, studying these highly technical, socially relevant subjects. Law, property law, economics. He was just mapping out success.
The steady future. That's what everyone wanted back then, right?
Absolutely. The kind every prosperous family in the late 19th century dreamed of securing. And he was good at it, already publishing papers, moving up the academic ladder. But, and this is where it gets interesting, our sources reveal that even in those sensible law days, he felt this strange, quiet internal tension.
Simmering conflict.
Yeah, something wasn't quite right.
And that's where the synesthesia part comes in, or at least his description of it.
Exactly. He later claimed that colors literally spoke to him, like music. And he insisted this wasn't just some poetic description, he felt it physically.
So blue wasn't just blue.
No, it hummed. Or it rang with the deep timbre of a cello, he'd say. Yellow vibrated, almost aggressively. Red felt profound, visceral, warm.
Wow. So this inner world must have been incredibly rich.
Yeah.
And demanding.
Completely. And existing entirely beneath this very pragmatic surface of, jurisprudence and academic papers. It was this persistent, nagging longing for meaning that went beyond the cold, structured logic of contracts and legal codes.
His external life was all measured, precise, dedicated to the coldness of facts, as he put it.
Well, his internal world was just pulsing with this chaotic symphony of color.
And this inner tension, it finds a literal physical outlet, doesn't it, during that research trip in 1889?
Ah, yes, the Vologda trip, which was supposed to be purely academic. He travels to Vologda, this northern town known for its traditional folk culture, wooden architecture.
To study local property law, peasant communities. Very dry stuff.
Very dry. But then comes the Vologda revelation. This is the moment where that quiet rebellion just busts open. It seems to completely contradict his whole academic purpose there.
He steps into a traditional peasant home.
Right. And the walls aren't covered with, the polite imported European wallpaper you'd find in Moscow. They're covered floor to ceiling with brightly painted folk art. Stylized icons, vibrant flowers, scenes just bursting with local color.
And his description of it is incredible, almost hallucinatory.
He said it was like stepping inside a painting. He felt physically immersed in the colors, the forms. He even described how the furniture itself seemed to be singing a melody.
Singing.
Singing. The colors, which usually just told stories, spiritual or folk narratives, they became the environment itself. They created the space.
For a man trained to see objects in terms of legal status, utility, that must have been revolutionary.
Absolutely. His first physical realization that color wasn't just decoration. It wasn't just description. It could create space, radiate life, communicate profound, nonverbal spiritual truth.
It's such a powerful anecdote. But we should probably acknowledge the historical debate here, shouldn't we? Our sources mention it.
Yeah, definitely. Was this truly a sudden, authentic shock, a genuine calling? Or did Kandinsky, looking back, maybe romanticize this memory a bit, maybe inflate it?
Because if you're abandoning a really prestigious career for something totally irrational, you kind of need a perfect origin myth, right?
That's the key question, isn't it? Was he consciously building the legend of Kandinsky? Maybe. Probably, to some extent. But, whether the shock was totally authentic or carefully curated memory later on, the impact is undeniable. Who else describes color as a living creature, something that sings and radiates, unless that feeling genuinely shook their intellectual foundation right to the core?
True. Yet, despite this sort of internal earthquake, the conventional man, he hangs on for a little while longer.
He does. He finishes his degree, gets married to his cousin, Anya Chimikina, in 1892, a very conventional arrangement back then. Sets up that polite, sensible Moscow life, social events, legal consultations.
But he writes about feeling suffocated.
Repeatedly. Suffocated by the silence of logic. Feeling trapped in a life that was, technically successful, but spiritually just hollow.
And then the universe basically throws down the gauntlet. Tests his commitment to stability.
Right around 1895, he gets the career dream job offer, invited to become a professor at the University of Dorpat, that's modern-day Tartu in Estonia.
Wow. Okay, so that's stability cemented. Validation for his entire academic career.
Exactly. He has to choose the comfortable, predictable future or the frightening, colorful unknown that's been humming inside him.
So the Dorpat offer was the logical path, the sensible choice. But 1895 was also the year something else happened. A quieter moment, maybe, but the one that really rearranged his whole belief system.
The catalyst for the Great Escape.
Right. He visits an art exhibition in Moscow, and he encounters a painting by Claude Monet, one of the Haystacks series.
And this is the moment, the definitive moment the lawyer's logic just collapses. Completely. Kandinsky stands in front of this impressionist canvas, and he is just deeply, profoundly confused.
He describes seeing blurry stacks of hay, objects with no clear outlines, no solid form, not like traditional painting at all.
No recognizable subject matter in the way he understood it. He even admitted he couldn't really tell what the subject was.
But at the same time,
he was half amused, half spellbound. The object itself dissolved, but the colors had a soul that he could feel.
That's the huge metaphysical crisis, isn't it? The subject didn't matter. The pure, unfiltered sensation, the feeling did. The painting just bypassed his rational brain, spoke straight to his gut, his core.
It really hit him like a revelation. If Monet could paint light and atmosphere without needing that precise structural logic of classical painting, well, maybe Kandinsky could achieve something even deeper.
Like painting the sound and spirit of the universe, without relying on objects at all.
Exactly. He realized his law books were basically prisons made of words. And that professorship suddenly felt like a contract he never actually meant to sign.
It's such a profound shift. Was this just him, though? Or were other artists at the time, the symbolists, the theosophists, were they already feeling that the material world just wasn't enough?
Oh, that feeling was definitely in the air in the 1890s. Absolutely. There was this widespread sense that modern science, materialism, they were kind of failing to account for human emotion, for spirituality.
Okay.
But Kandinsky's response was just uniquely radical. He wasn't just shifting genres within art, he was changing professions entirely, which leads to the big decision.
Within months, the irrational yet totally necessary decision is made.
Yep. He abandons the professorship, abandons his law career, sells his belongings, and moves to Munich to study art at nearly 30 years old.
His colleagues, his family, they must have thought he was having some kind of breakdown.
Oh, almost certainly. A highly promising lawyer, destined for this stable, comfortable professorship, trading it all for blurry haystacks in art school. It's nuts from their perspective.
But for him?
An overwhelming sense of liberation, almost physical relief. He writes later he felt freed from the gray cloak of the lawyer's mind. He transformed instantly into a citizen of color.
And he arrives in Munich, this city buzzing with intellectual restlessness, ready to start over, as a complete novice.
He enrolls in Anton Ashby's private art school. And yeah, he's not only older than his classmates, significantly older, but he also completely lacks formal artistic training.
But he doesn't care about technical perfection, does he? Not about copying reality.
Not at all. He's relentlessly focused on finding the emotional resonance of form, something invisible, something musical.
And his teacher, Ashby.
Ashby, this eccentric teacher, he recognizes this internal quest, maybe senses Kandinsky's intensity. He tells his students, and Kandinsky takes this as like a personal mission, you must feel the line before you draw it.
And Kandinsky took that literally.
Absolutely literally, interpreting every brushstroke, not just as applying pigment, but as activating a musical vibration, carrying its own internal melody, its own rhythm.
Which brings us back to his deep connection to music. That's the real key to understanding his whole approach, isn't it?
It's fundamental. He played the cello as a young man. He loved the emotional intensity of Wagner. He fundamentally saw music as the ultimate metaphor for what painting needed to become. Pure emotion, pure sensation.
And this is where his concept of synesthesia, the mixing of senses, really comes to the front. Whether it was genuinely neurological or more of a poetic construct for him.
Right. The debate continues on that, but either way, it shaped everything. He formalized his system into that iconic analogy. Color is the keyboard, the eyes are the hammers, the soul is the piano with many strings.
So the artist's job is to strike the keys, make the soul resonate.
Precisely. And he gave these incredibly specific examples that really define his entire body of work later on.
Like yellow. What did yellow sound like?
The sound of a trumpet. Or maybe a high-pitched fanfare. Aggressive, warm, loud.
And blue.
That was the sound of the deep cello. Spiritual, quiet, cool.
Red.
Red was the sound of a violin playing forte. Loud, passionate. And just as importantly, he defined the absence of color too.
White.
White, for him, was the sound of a pause, like a pregnant silence full of potential, a breath before the next musical movement.
And black.
Black was different, an eternal silence, the end point. He really wanted art to be this genuinely multisensory experience, something you listen to with your soul, not just looked at with your eyes.
So by 1900, the law books are officially gathering dust.
Oh, yeah. The transformation isn't just complete, it's cemented.
Yeah.
He's no longer a lawyer who happens to paint. He's an artist who once made the, let's say, mistake of studying law.
And he's ready to enter this modern age where color is going to define the world, not just describe it.
So moving into the 20th century, Kandinsky's just rapidly synthesizing all these influences. He's building his new artistic vocabulary.
Right, he's absorbing the lessons from Monet.
Yep. And the flatness and spiritual power of Russian folk art.
The emotional intensity of symbolism.
And, really crucially, the philosophical framework of theosophy.
Okay, let's pause on theosophy for a second. Why did this spiritualist movement, this idea that art springs from invisible cosmic forces, why did that resonate so powerfully with artists in Europe before World War I?
Well, I think it was because modern science, while incredibly successful, was also seen by many as cold, limited, maybe even soulless.
Right, it didn't explain everything.
Exactly. Theosophy was really popular then, and it offered this unifying spiritual vision that went beyond materialism. It linked the physical world we see to these invisible cosmic planes of existence.
And for Kandinsky, who was already seeing sound and feeling color.
It provided the perfect intellectual justification. It meant his art wasn't just arbitrary scribbles, it was a necessary quest to map those higher spiritual vibrations. It gave his subjective experience a kind of objective spiritual framework.
So he starts actively linking the spiritual and the visual, trusting completely in these vibrations of the unseen over the linear logic he used to practice as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. And this is where his theory of inner necessity really takes hold.
Inner necessity, that sounds important.
It's the moral core of his art. It's the idea that every true artist paints what must be painted. Not what's convenient or commercially viable or technically easy, but what the age demands, what the individual soul requires.
Like a spiritual obligation.
Exactly. A spiritual obligation for the artist to reflect the profound hidden reality of their time.
So in 1901, he co-founds Phalanx, this avant-garde group and art school in Munich.
Yes, and he serves as president. He uses the school as a platform to teach his emerging, pretty radical series on color and form.
Teaching things like
that geometric form carries inherent emotion. A circle is quiet and eternal. A diagonal is restless and disruptive.
His students must have been a bit bewildered. Art theory or prophecy?
Probably a bit of both. but they understood the conviction behind it. And it's here, among his students, that his really profound and creatively vital relationship with the painter Gabriele Münter developed.
Münter. She was essential, wasn't she?
Absolutely crucial. Not only a brilliant artist in her own right, but she also became a kind of documentarian of his early abstract shifts. She gives us unique insights into his process.
And together, they bought a house and moved to Murnau.
Yes, this small Bavarian village, Murnau, which truly became his laboratory of vision.
Surrounded by the Alps.
The outlines of objects just started to melt for him there. They saw the landscape dissolving into pure rhythm, pure patches of color. Kandinsky was experimenting like mad, moving really rapidly from descriptive landscapes towards pure sensation.
And this brings us to that famous story, maybe exaggerated, maybe not, about accidental abstraction.
Right, the Twilight Studio story. Around 1908, he comes home to his studio, it's getting dark, and he sees this canvas leaning against the wall, glowing, beautiful, unrecognizable colors and forms, just pure composition.
He's spellbound.
Totally spellbound by the intensity of this unknown work, only to get closer and realize.
This is one of his own paintings.
Exactly, just leaning sideways or upside down. And that simple shift, removing the context of up and down, removed the object entirely for him in that moment. He writes, "That was the moment when I saw that objects harmed my pictures."
Harmed them. Because objects force the viewer to focus on the surface reality.
Not the inner necessity, exactly. So Murnau became the place where the visible world really melted, and he began cataloging sensations, trying to capture pure feeling.
And this led to his naming convention, borrowing directly from music.
Yes, which really shows his process.
Yeah.
He classified his works into 3 types. First, impressions. These were direct impressions of nature, still somewhat descriptive, like a musical sketch.
Yeah.
Second, improvisations. These were largely unconscious, spontaneous expressions of inner character, painted quickly, no preliminary studies, like a jazz solo, you could say.
More intuitive.
Very intuitive. And third, compositions. These were the big ones, highly developed, long-form works, the result of extensive preparation, studies, geometrical structuring, meticulously planned, like a symphony.
That transition really shows the lawyer and the mystic working together, doesn't it? Spontaneity and structure.
Perfectly. And it's all about connecting across disciplines. We know he loved Wagner, but the real intellectual catalyst, musically speaking, came from Arnold Schoenberg.
The experimental composer. Atonal music.
Right. Kandinsky attends a concert in 1911. Hears Schoenberg's music completely abandon traditional tonality, the established scales, the harmonic rules people expected.
It must have sounded radical. Chaotic, even.
To many, yes. But Kandinsky heard something else. He heard music that was free of objective structure, yet still full of profound inner structure. He recognized Schoenberg instantly as a kindred spirit.
Because Schoenberg was doing with sound what Kandinsky wanted to do with paint.
Exactly. Schoenberg was abandoning tonality the way Kandinsky was abandoning perspective and figuration. He writes to Schoenberg immediately, starting this really influential correspondence. He says something like, "Your music leads us into a new realm where art won't be bound by the past anymore."
Wow. And this intellectual foundation, this connection, leads directly to 1911 and the Blue Reiter, Der Blaue Reiter.
The monumental year. He co-founds it with fellow artist Franz Marc.
And the symbolism of the name, Blue Reiter.
Incredibly rich. Blue, for Kandinsky, that was the deep, internal, spiritual calm he was always seeking.
Right.
For Marc, that was the symbol of revolutionary freedom, movement breaking away. Together, they represented this spiritual journey of the artist away from the material world towards the transcendent.
And they published the Blue Reiter almanac, which wasn't just paintings.
No, it was this remarkable document, a scrapbook of rebellion, really. It blended scholarly essays on music theory, reproductions of primitive folk art, children's drawings, actual music notations.
All thrown together.
To make a point, its core argument was that art, music, and spirit, regardless of their cultural origin, whether it's a tribal masque or a classical symphony, they all share the exact same unifying pulse, the same inner necessity.
And their core philosophy, their motto.
Yeah.
It feels chillingly prophetic now, looking back just before World War I.
The more frightening the world becomes, the more abstract art shall be. For Kandinsky, abstraction wasn't escapism, it was survival. A necessary refusal to engage with the, spiritually empty surface of modern life. It was a demand for refuge, for deeper meaning.
And the critics, how did they react to all this?
Oh, with hostility, naturally. They couldn't parse canvases without recognizable subjects. They were mocked as children with brushes, their work dismissed as the dreams of a drunk violinist.
Ouch. And Kandinsky's response?
Defiant. Simple. Rooted right back in his theory of inner necessity. It is what it must be. He was totally used to being misunderstood by then. He knew art was supposed to disorient sometimes, to bypass the shallow intellect and force a visceral, maybe uncomfortable response.
And this culminates really in 1913 with Untitled, first abstract watercolor.
The threshold moment. No subject, no perspective, no vanishing point, just pure color and motion. He'd finally crossed over, moving from the improvisational stage into pure composition, painting what he called the invisible kind of reality.
The lawyer was definitively, spiritually gone.
Vanished into color.
But that utopian dream of the Blue Rider, it just shatters violently with World War I in 1914.
Yeah, the war changes everything. Kandinsky is suddenly an enemy alien in Germany because he's Russian. He's forced to return to Moscow.
And he returns to a homeland that's also in massive upheaval. Artistic upheaval, political revolution. He's trying to find his footing amidst the Russian Revolution.
And this period is really crucial for understanding his next stylistic shift, because he suddenly finds himself in ideological conflict with the dominant Soviet avant-garde, particularly Kazimir Malevich and the constructivists.
Right, there's a big philosophical gap there.
Immense. The constructivists, they were also using geometric shapes, but for them it was about utility, serving the state.
Applying these forms to industrial design, propaganda posters, mass production.
Exactly. Geometric shapes as tools for the masses, for building a new society. Practical. Functional.
Whereas Kandinsky saw geometric shapes as
tools for transcendence. Windows to the soul. The straight line, the square, the circle for him, these were metaphysical structures, not just building blocks.
And the new Soviet bureaucracy?
Yeah.
They didn't really appreciate his mystical tendencies.
Not at all. They saw it as useless, bourgeois, even counter-revolutionary. Abstract spiritual art didn't build tractors.
And that leads to that famous kind of damning assessment he received from an official when he tried to implement his abstract teaching ideas.
Yeah, the official basically told him the people do not need abstract art. They need tractors and propaganda.
Wow. For Kandinsky, who believed painting could literally touch the divine, that must have felt like a door slamming shut.
Pretty much. The conversation was functionally over. He was trapped again, this time by revolutionary logic instead of legal logic.
But he didn't stop painting, did he?
No, he kept working. His Moscow paintings from this time, they still pulse with tension. Bright geometry searching for some kind of order amidst all the socio-political chaos. It's like an internal struggle for structure playing out on canvas.
But eventually he leaves Russia again in 1921.
Yeah, disheartened by the bureaucratic stifling of the spiritual element in art, he needed to find a place where that was value.
And then, thankfully, he gets this extraordinary, really life-saving invitation to join the Bauhaus in Weimar in 1922.
The perfect place, in a way. This school, founded by Walter Gropius, dedicated to structure, functionality, integrating art and life.
It seems like a bit of a jarring transition, though, from that spontaneous, almost romantic abstraction of the Blue Rider period to the clean, functional lines of the Bauhaus.
You'd think so, but for Kandinsky, it actually felt like a logical necessity. The chaotic spontaneity of the improvisations needed tempering, and the mathematical rigor he remembered from his law school days, it found a new purpose here.
He found community again, structure.
Yes, and his teaching style became this fascinating blend, equal parts mystic and mathematician. He taught color theory, form theory, but using geometric rigor not to suppress spiritual ideas, but to express them with universal clarity.
His friend Paul Klee called his color diagrams astral maps of emotion.
What a great description. And his art shifts dramatically into what we now call his geometric abstraction period. Gone are the soft, flowing lines for a while.
Now we see crisp circles, measured lines, precise grids, intersecting like complex musical notation.
Thinking of masterpieces like Composition 8 or Yellow, Red, Blue, spontaneity didn't vanish entirely, but it became intensely disciplined, held within the rigor of geometry.
And what's really critical here, something that profoundly influences us even today, is the theoretical text that formalized this system. Point and Line to Plane, published in 1926.
Ah, yes. His mature, systematized geometry of emotion. He literally laid down specific, almost scientific-sounding rules for how shapes, lines, and colors affect the viewer psychologically.
Let's look at some of those rules. They're still so powerful, aren't they? Still taught in design schools?
Absolutely. He assigned specific forces to different types of lines. The horizontal line, cold, stable, passive. The vertical line, warm, active.
And the diagonal line.
Ah, the diagonal, that was restless. It suggested tension, movement, disruption.
And the shapes themselves got assigned inherent colors, too.
Yes. Yellow was associated with the aggressive triangle. Calm, spiritual blue was assigned to the round, passive circle. And red was matched with the square, stable, powerful, grounded.
Wow.
And his idea that a point is the most concise form of silence, or that a line is movement through time, that fundamentally changed how designers approached space, composition, everything. This formalized system isn't just art history, it's like the DNA of modern visual culture.
It's wild to think about that the minimalist interface on your phone, or the way a warning sign uses sharp angles like triangles and yellows.
Or even a loading bar, using a line to symbolize movement through time, that's user experience flow.
It carries the direct echo of his theories from the 1920s.
Absolutely. Kandinsky provided the psychological grammar for digital aesthetics decades before computers even existed. He really was mapping the psychological geometry we now live inside.
But once again, political reality crashes the party.
Yeah. The rise of nationalism in Germany. The Nazis targeted abstract art, avant-garde art, labeling it decadent, alien, degenerate.
And the Bauhaus became a target.
A major target. It was eventually closed by the Nazis in 1933. His work was effectively labeled dangerous, subversive.
And when he was mocked by those who dismissed his work, ridiculing the uselessness of his circles and lines, he had that quiet, powerful reply.
Just summed up his entire spiritual resistance. Perhaps none, but they remind us that freedom has form.
Powerful. And with that final act of defiance, he was forced into his final exile to France.
So Paris in the 1930s. It's quieter for him, more anxious maybe. Kandinsky is in his late 60s now. He rents a small apartment in Neuilly-sur-Seine just outside Paris.
He's physically isolated again, isn't he? Without the structure of the Bauhaus, without the Blue Reiter movement.
Yeah, and his focus turns even further inward. His style subtly shifts again. He moves away from that hard, angular Bauhaus geometry towards softer, more organic, almost biomorphic shapes. His forms start floating. They look, well, people describe them as half microbe, half galaxy.
Half microbe, half galaxy. That's evocative.
Isn't it? He even started mixing sand into his paint to get different textures. He was studying marine biology, embryology for inspiration, looking at life at its most fundamental levels.
So the theme of this late period becomes microscopic and cosmic at the same time.
Exactly. He believed that in the smallest forms, there lies the same law as in the stars. He was looking for universal laws within the atom, within the cell, creating these compositions that feel like biological systems one moment and distant star charts the next.
Like in Composition IX, it really does feel like looking through both a telescope and a microscope.
He found a kind of peace inside the elemental forms, I think.
And his art, especially during the German occupation of Paris, it became this profound prayer, didn't it? A kind of silent resistance.
Absolutely. His studio was a sanctuary. He continued to paint, mostly small works because materials were scarce, but they have this intense internal light, reflecting his belief that the darker the night, the brighter the stars must sing.
He stayed in Paris through the occupation.
He did, refusing to stop painting, even when it was dangerous, even when materials were hard to find. He said something like, "To leave my colors would be to stop breathing."
Wow. And his ultimate defense of abstraction during those dark years. It's incredibly profound.
Because the spirit is abstract. Only what is abstract can survive reality.
That line, it feels foundational for so many artists who came after, especially after the war, seeing the material world just decimated.
Definitely. It connects his work directly to the abstract expressionists, the New York school. People like Mark Rothko, Jackson Pollock, they inherited fragments of Kandinsky's mystical faith in color and form, even if they took it in different directions.
And his final major painting, Composition X, from 1939, it feels like a concluding statement.
It's vast, mysterious, often described as an ocean of black filled with floating ovals and geometric islands of light. It feels less like just a painting and more like a farewell letter written in pure color.
He often described black as the most soundless color, didn't he? The color of eternal silence.
He did, but crucially, he also saw black as the color that contains all potential beginnings. The fertile void, the darkness before creation.
So Composition X is simultaneously a farewell and a genesis. A departure, but maybe a hopeful one.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Reflective, but also containing potential.
He died peacefully in December 1944, just months before Paris was liberated.
Yeah, and his wife, Nina, she recalled his last words were gentle, almost amused. Perfectly fitting for the man who spent his life chasing the music of color. I am hearing new sounds.
Perfect. And his influence, as we've touched on, it didn't stop there. It just rippled outward. providing the theoretical, the spiritual grounding for generations of abstract painters.
His geometry, his color theory, they became the invisible grammar of modern aesthetics. Seriously, when a child today instinctively chooses yellow for happy or blue for calm in a drawing, they're unknowingly speaking Kandinsky's deeply researched language. It's embedded now. Hashtag tag outro. So we kind of circle back to where we started, that central contradiction that defined him. Kandinsky's genius really was the synthesis of the utterly rational, the lawyer, the geometric theorist, the rigorous system builder.
And the utterly mystical, the belief in color having sound, spirit, vibration, the synesthesia.
He took law and somehow turned it into music on canvas.
He really taught us that art could be simultaneously fragile, totally subjective, and yet defiantly structured. He managed to give a system, a blueprint, to the soul itself.
And the true measure of his legacy, I think, is that we now unknowingly speak his language. Every time we look at thoughtful design or architecture or digital interfaces, his ideas just became the intellectual bloodstream of modernism flowing invisibly beneath the surface of our reality.
Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Something that connects his historical work right to your present moment.
Kandinsky wrote late in his life that his last theoretical notes explored this idea of the infinite point.
The infinite point.
Yeah, the place where all lines converge. But, he said, not in space, but in consciousness. A purely conceptual meeting point.
Okay.
So, if Kandinsky fundamentally saw color as pure vibration, and our modern digital world is built entirely on waveforms, data packets, pixels, essentially on the convergence of information at a single theoretical point in code or consciousness, did he, decades ahead of his time, actually map the psychological geometry that we now navigate every single day online on screens? Did the lawyer who abandoned stability end up creating the most stable universal language for the modern abstract spirit?
Something to think about.